This is a quick story of how one of the world's most delusional leaders crowned himself emperor and quickly ascended to power to become the second president of his country's history after gaining independence from La France, only to do absolutely nothing for the country and its people. You see, the serving president at the time, David Dacko, requested that France relieve him from his duty in the colonial French armed forces after distinguishing himself in the French colonial campaign to keep Vietnam as one of its colonies in a region that was known as the colony of French Indochina, which covered land from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, but today is simply known as mainland Southeast Asia. So here you have an African man whose country was under colonial occupation, fighting on behalf of La France away from his home against other oppressed people who were fighting and aspiring to be freed from La France. Anyways, he was relieved from his duty by La France, and then he was appointed by the president, the head of the armies, right after it gained independence from France in 1960. However, 6 years later, he overthrew the president who appointed him as the head of the army to become the country's second president. And from that point on, the circus began, because 10 years later, he changed the country's name from the Central African Republic to the Central African Empire. And if you hadn't guessed it yet, we are talking about Mr. Jean Bedel Bokassa. And in 1977, he self-proclaimed and crowned himself Emperor Bokassa I, with this famous picture of him seated on a golden throne in a ceremony that was inspired by the coronation of his idol and hero, Napoleon Bonaparte. Yes, the same Napoleon who was defeated and whooped by General Toussaint Louverture in the Battle of Haiti. Now, it was estimated that the whole circus, meaning the coronation, costed more than $20 million, which represented a quarter of the country's entire annual budget. It is also said that to cover the cost, the salaries of 40,000 employees were cut by 50% for several months, all that in a country where the majority of the people were struggling to make ends meet. Listen, at this point on, we can all agree to give him the golden boots and the Ballon d'Or of nonsense, because he demonstrated to the world that he reached the vertex of la folie de grandeur, or what you guys call in English, the delusion of grandeur. However, there was more, because why not, since we all know that absurdity has never killed anyone. You see, Bokassa had great admiration for Charles de Gaulle, the former French president, and his admiration was beyond the admiration a caring dog can give to a human being, to the point that the emperor used to refer to the French president as daddy or father, whichever translation you want to go with. And it is said that he used to refer to, and the French president used to refer to him as le soudard. You can pause the video and read the definition for yourself. Now check this out. This is Bokassa in 1970 during the funeral of the former French president, whom he used to call father, crying out loud all the tears of his body, to the point that it was reported he was so emotional that he had to be held because he couldn't stand on his own. Now, if you think that's bad, then listen to this. He was seen and heard screaming in a sad voice, full of pain in his voice, saying, and I quote, "Father, why did you leave?" Now, let me repeat for the people in the back. He said, "Father, why did you leave?" while mourning the death of a French president. I think whenever I think about this, the first thing that comes to mind is Malcolm X's speech, message to the grassroots. If you know, you know. Listen, Bokassa didn't cry like that when in 1979 he tried to force school children to wear uniforms that were manufactured by a company owned by his wives, and the youth protested against that ridiculous idea. Some were shot and others were stripped naked and released in the street by police officers who infiltrated the movement. Someone please get Kenya in the chat. On April 19 of the same year, an estimated 100 students were arrested, imprisoned, and beaten to the next life by Bokassa himself and his imperial guard. All I can say about this is that Bokassa valued the life of a French man who was an enemy of African independence, progress, and people more than he valued the lives of those school children and his own people. His ending should serve as a lesson to all of our current and future leaders, because this life is like a barber shop. It doesn't matter how long it takes, everyone will get their hair cut.
We, ni nini?